So yeah, so nobody puts WordPress in a container, Docker, GitLab, and continuous integration. If you want to tweet, you can include my Twitter handle that's right there on the bottom. And then also, like Curtis said, please use the hashtag WP Campus. I think Patrick Swayze put it best, like nobody puts WordPress in a container. Maybe that's what he said. Maybe you missed. I think that it was a little bit of a time ago before, or I don't know when the movie came out, but it's been a little bit of time, so I don't know. So spoiler, we put WordPress in a container, right? So about me, I'm a web smithy for Atom State. Yes, this is a real title. I'm trying to make it a real title. This is on my office door. Awesome. So trying to make this a thing. Been kind of including into conference attendee title things for a few years now. So join me. So we've been running at Atom State. We've been running WordPress since the Mu days. So for us, it was like 2009, 2010, which now Mu is now WordPress multi-site. And so that was on a blog server. So we're doing a big site transition here in 2018 to move our main EDU into WordPress. So how do you deploy WordPress? For us and for me specifically, it kind of looked a little bit like this. It's like, are the lights on? So yeah, so hold on to your butts. Like this was, I mean, maybe this was okay for a blog server. I mean, this is my ops team giving me sudo access on our server, you know, doing the whole old school FTP upload kind of thing. That's great and all. I'm glad my ops team can trust me with sudo. I don't want them to have to trust me with sudo, right? So that was kind of when we're going to switch to the main site, maybe we should look at doing things a little bit differently. Kind of want it to look like this. It's a Unix system, I know this. And serendipitously enough, like this kind of looks like a list, like a lot of containers, right? So here we go. It's a Unix system, I know this. So yeah, this is where I describe it as kind of a quantum leap of what we've been doing. So no old school FTP, be very intentional about how we're deploying WordPress, and that's where the rest of this comes in. 3 parts: Docker, Git, and GitLab CI CD. So we need to get good with Git, get with program, get into the groove in Turbo. Yes, there's an Turbo. I feel like this tweet needs some more love. So yeah, Git is an awesome robot in a clown suit. So what we do Git-wise, Git flow of Atom CDU. So develop on desktop, of course, proving that on our local machine or my local machine on dev's local machines, and we're going to push for remote, in this case, GitLab. So I'm mostly involved in doing dev on theme plugin, like probably most of you are. Like that's where we do our dev. So usually when you have some kind of feature, you would just want to go ahead, create a branch. In this example, we're using card element as our branch name. Shortcut, you know, you could always branch your, name your branch, check out your branch, right? Work on the feature, code, commit. You're going to want to go ahead and merge that branch into your master. Check your, check your repo. Make sure you're sync with master, and then go ahead and merge that. Optionally, you can delete the branch when you're done, and then we're going to go ahead here and send it to our GitLab. Important thing to note here is that we can send a tag here, or you can tag that in GitLab, and I'll show you why that's important later. So the process for our premium themes that we're not tracking or we're not developing on. So we update those on local. We then initialize a Git repo and then send that up to our GitLab. And then this may require a force push. Like, I'm not interested in taking care of any merges. That's another dev's code. I'm not going to be responsible for that. And then again, we're tagging, and I usually like to mirror the version number from that plugin author. So if you're using like a 4.45 or 4-45, I'll just mirror that, so it just makes things easier later. Really want to throw this out there for any plugin developers. Like Delicious Brain has a really good post about how they're allowing their plugin purchasers to go ahead and get an API key from them, and then so you can just hit an endpoint, and you don't have to worry about creating your own repo mirroring their plugin, right? So you have these slides will be available. This is a link, and then you can go check out that blog post. I think more plugin developers should look into doing something like that. So, brief intro to Docker, right? So Docker is essentially a wrapper around Linux containers, right? So it's often compared to virtual machines, which, as you may know, a virtual machine is like dealing with the entire computer or server. Docker is usually associated with trying to make this more lightweight. So they do a lot of things which containers are sharing the Linux kernel of the host machine, right? So you don't have to worry about building all that up. It's just going to use what it needs to use. It delivers closely on the build once, run anywhere, right? So we're using the same code on local as the dev, as QA, as production. And me as a developer, I can worry about what's inside of our container. Our operations folks can be concerned about what's outside the container. So I'm in charge of doing the theme, doing plugin, pulling in other libraries. Operations is concerned about like the networking, database, monitoring, those kinds of things. So outside of the container. So Docker is typically used with command line using the Docker command. And most of the time you're going to be working with the Docker file. So what does our Docker file look like at Atoms, right? So here's kind of like a brief illustration. So what we're doing is we're taking the base WordPress image from Docker Hub, putting into our image. We're taking premium themes, child themes, and premium plugins from our GitLab install. And then we're also taking plugins available on .org through wpackages, through Composer, and adding those to our container, to our image. So what does that look like? So this is, if you've ever worked with Docker before, like this looks familiar, you always start out with like, what are you basing your Docker image on? So in our case, it's WordPress. You can just get away and just say WordPress, right? So that would just pull latest from Docker Hub. A little note too is like latest isn't always latest with Docker Hub. I've found it could be like a couple days behind official release, like when the blog post goes out on WordPress.org. So maybe that's part of your decision making if you want to do something like this. So we give it a tag, or we're targeting the version of WordPress, and then we're telling it to bring in the Apache flavor. If you link back and follow this through in Docker Hub, you can actually see like, so you can kind of go in a rabbit hole. So you can see like with the WordPress official isn't just WordPress. It's pulling in a version of PHP, and then eventually it's pulling in Apache. And so these all just link together. And then optionally, you can give it a maintainer. And that's what we're doing there. This is also another kind of familiar command you'll see in a Docker file. This is just like installing things that we're going to use later in the process. So here are some things to note. We're installing Git, and we're doing some things with LDAP, and then we're also going to install Composer here. The second part is we're adding an SSH key so we can talk to our other repos in GitLab. So this is an example of how we're pulling in our theme and a plugin within our GitLab, right? So here you can see the tag that I used before. This is mirroring that particular author's versioning system. And then pulling in our own, and then pulling in a plugin that we're tracking because this is a paid plugin. And also pulling, another thing to note here is we're pulling it into the folder that the Docker, the WordPress Docker image is going to pull. So it does a few things. It moves into where it's going to look for plugin. It changes where WP content is, basically. Here, this is where we're pulling in our .org plugins through Composer. So running in the Composer, the dot file is in the root of the repo. So I can show that in here in a second. And then another very important thing to note here is that as you build and take down containers, everything goes with it. So here we're making persistent storage, basically, right? So we're saying uploads is going to stay here on container build. When we build a new container, it's still going to have the things that we've uploaded into it in the past. Very important stuff. So Composer, W packages, if you're not familiar, like I said earlier, it's a mirror to our the WordPress.org directory. Basically, you define a custom repository in Composer, and then you load in your plugins and themes by tag. And then you can optionally define an install path, which we need to do because the WordPress Docker file moves things. So this is an example of that. See here, this is where we're showing where the repository lives. And then here we're pulling in our plugins. The thing to note here is that if you have a particularly noisy plugin or something that's getting updated a lot, like Yost's plugin, like you can just give it a star. It's going to pull in that latest if you want it to do it that way. And then again, we're changing install path to make sure it ends up in the right place. So this is basically the Atoms image repo. This is all you need for our WordPress image. So of course you get ignore. We have the continuous integration file, which does the Automagic things, and we can get that into that. I'll show that an example of that in the next section. Our Docker file, which you just walked through, and our Composer JSON file we just walked through, and then our SSH key, right? So now the magic begins in GitLab. So after we commit to the repo in GitLab, our image is auto-built with a continuous integration file. We then tag it, and then that Docker file or that Docker image is available in our registry. It's pulling later. So brief intro, if you don't know what GitLab is, it's they define themselves as like a single application role stage of DevOps, so touching development, QA, security operations. It's great because I haven't been working with so it's great because all the teams can get together and work together. So we're using this across campus. And so we have our system administrators in there, we have our banner team, and we have the web development team all working in the same place. So that's kind of a cool thing. We're running on the community edition, but the thing to note too is that GitLab just announced like so the Gold Ultimate is like all the bells and whistles. So they've announced like an educational pricing. So if you're interested in running GitLab, you might look into this you can get that as an educational institution basically for free if you qualify for that. So look into that. But so basically it's one app. You can do plan, create, verify. So you can do, if you wanted to, you can track your tickets here. You know, of course, you can commit your code with Git. You can verify and package. Packaging is what we're kind of doing with tagging. And you can also do the release with tagging. Our ops people can also configure and monitor in their things outside of the container. So, I mean, this is a pretty typical CI process here. So you have, you know, you do your work, you do your code, you commit that code. Within GitLab, the CI process starts, so they auto build it. We run some tests there, then we can push to our QA, and then push to production, basically. So for Atoms, we have two different CI processes, right? Our Docker image, we code on local, right? We commit to GitLab. It does the auto build after the tag or before the tag. It builds, it's available. Optionally, this is where you do your testing. And then now it's available in our registry for us to pull in later with Docker Compose. So Docker Compose is an API, or basically it uses a Docker API to do multiple containers. So we're pulling our Atoms image from our registry, and we're setting up the other containers that WordPress needs. So this is like MySQL, Nginx. We do some logging kind of thing. We have this is where we build our PHPMyAdmin, all of that. It's really nice because it automatically sets up a Docker network that's internal to all these containers to talk to each other. You can also set up your persistent volume here too. We're also doing some different error logs kind of things in our Compose file. So just like, what does that look like? Again, we have our Atoms WordPress image. We join that with the Nginx image, our MariaDB, the logging tools, PHPMyAdmin tools, and the volumes. So during the CI process, like this is built. It's available in our test network. We've set it up so that we have to manually deploy to go to production, and then it's available on our live network. Currently, Docker Swarm is providing those networks, or is providing that to the world. So what does the Compose look like? This is like a little excerpt of the Compose. They're written in YAML. Here we set up our test networks. We set up our DB, and then we set up our image. Things to note here is that, again, this is our tagging system. So we're pulling in this version of the Atoms WordPress image. And then thing to note here too is that our office persons can pull in their database versions in the same file here. This is the CI file that we have in GitLab sitting with our Compose. So basically we just check for if Docker is available. Have a very simple deploy stage. And then this is where we're referencing that Compose file I just showed, telling it we only want to do this manually. So here's an example of like what that pipeline looks like. So it's just the interface of GitLab, and you're showing here the tags that we're pushing. If the build passes the stages, we only have the one stage in that last file, and then here's our manual deploy. All right, so is this worth doing? Yeah. Obviously, my answer is yes. It's very easy to roll back, right? So versioning in general is worth doing. this is kind of thinking of versioning your entire server environment, right? So easy rollback for devs, easy rollback for ops. It's kind of giving, well, it is. It's a brand new server at every deploy, right? So building up the server and then tearing it down at deploy. Yeah. It's going to enable us to have some future collaboration. Like right now, I'm the only one deving on WordPress for Atoms, but if we decided to hire more devs, like very easy to put them in there, very easy to tell them that this person can push the WordPress image, but they can't deploy, stuff like that. Also enables collaboration with their ops team. Like in the past, like they've managed the servers, they've had their own Puppet kind of things. Like I didn't need to look or didn't need to have access to Puppet, but I'm actually have like more visibility into the server building process in this system. It gives us better transparency. Like if we know something's wrong, we can go and track what made that change, what broke something. Gives us an audit log. The ops people like to know what's running. They like to know what version's running. So, yeah.
How did you sell that to your sysadmin team to like start allowing them to use this? Because what I'm seeing now is I want to set this up, and we got, hey, I can set that up for you. But every time it's a different version of Tomcat, it's a different version of Apache, that kind of stuff. It's like we need the so I want to. What is your experience of like saying, hey, this is a really good idea?
Yeah. So the question was like, how do we sell it to the sysadmins? Like, I'm working with the sysadmins. Like, so I mean, I guess there wasn't really a selling because we're doing it together.
They got it.
Yeah. So and I think maybe I'll touch in some more points and then maybe revisit that in a few slides, I think.
Okay.
And then of course, like the testing and availability piece. We're not doing a lot of testing right now, but there is a future for that, which is going to be very powerful for us. Yeah, so some quick lessons learned. It's very interesting to wrap your head around Docker, right? So think of it as like you're doing all of the work ahead of time instead of after the server's there. So you have to, it's still taking me time to get through that, and it's been a really cool process between me and my sysadmins of learning this together, right? Also, like I've been very comfortable with the command line and doing WordPress updating on our server. So lack of command line has been challenging in Docker. And we're also dealing with some Swarm stuff. So we're running like I said earlier, we're running stuff on Docker Swarm. We have some issues around that we're working through. Another thing that can happen is like when you're auto building things, like GitLab can get full of basically leftover images. So be nice to your sysadmins, clear that out so that you just don't have to waste that space. And then deploy keys too. When you have different repos in GitLab, you have to tell it you want to talk to each other. So there's a place in the interface that you can just simply put deploy keys, make sure all of those are connected. Yeah, so some future, like we want to do some more auto testing, like I said earlier. We have this idea to do a fancy import to dev, so we're doing backups on live. So we want to automate the process so that we take that backup and then using WP CLI, change those values and then just throw that to our dev. So that could be really cool. Right now, we're not running any replicas. So if we were to truly have like a high availability with this, like we could have one version of the container running and then build up the other one and then tear it down when we want to switch. And yeah. Also, we're looking into the possibility of switching to Kubernetes. And the workflow for us doesn't change. It just changes on that endpoint. So that could be really powerful.
Where are you deploying? Are you deploying it against local hardware?
Local hardware, yeah. And also, Matt has a talk too about his experience with Kubernetes. I want to shout out if you want, and I'm very interested in seeing what he has to say. So, yeah. Anyway, special thanks to my sysadmins, Cameron Miller, Randall Smith. Randall basically wrote a book on Docker, so he's been really awesome. Charles has helped me a little bit with some of the composer things, and he has a really good talk post about if you want to learn more about catapults and rocks, that kind of thing. So, but he's been doing a lot of stuff with Composer for a while, so I wanted to thank him for that. I don't know, these are some like places that I found helpful with like learning Docker, learning the continuous integration GitLab things. So these are links again. So if you're interested in those, take a look at the slides. And yeah, questions. So do you feel like I've answered the selling point, or I don't know? For us, it was like all about like they could figure out what is running at any given time and troubleshoot like real quickly at that, and the ability to roll back. Trust things too. Like if like I said earlier, they trusted me with root access to our server to throw a new WordPress version at any given time. They don't have to trust me anymore. They do trust me. They don't have to, right? So that's really powerful for them.
I really like that you said that your banner team, your CRM team is on there too, because that Docker is getting big in that space as well. So we're trying to sell that to our network sysadmin team to say, you need this.
And it's really cool too. I mean, maybe it's just, it's really cool having everybody in the same system. And like, there doesn't have to be all of these different programs that other teams are running. Like, maybe for a smaller team, like we can have better documentation about like how to do things because everybody's in the same system. We're doing all the same things, even though they're not closely related. Maybe we can learn from each other and then, build each other up. Yeah.
So we do a very similar approach to you, but I've been experimenting a little bit with a slightly modified version, and I noticed that you keep your SSH private key in the repo. So do you push the image to Docker Hub, or how does that work so you keep security?
Yeah, so GitLab basically has its own registry, which Docker Hub is a registry.
Okay.
Right? So yeah, we're pulling from our local registry to access that image.
Because we're using Bitbucket, and I don't know that they have that kind of registry.
Yeah, I haven't had much experience with Bitbucket. Yeah. Maybe Curtis, have you used Bitbucket some? But
yeah, I've used it some, but I mean, I'm not sure how well it works with the. I mean, there are tools out there to basically to use something like I can't remember the name of them, but anyway, to use continuous integration and continuous development, but some of Bitbucket's authentication methods can be screwy at times. Yeah. And so it's not going to be 100%. And we're kind of in the same situation where I'm working on trying to integrate things with Bitbucket. And it's tough.
Because we have our custom teams and plugins on a status repo. They get pulled in from Bitbucket, that integrates that way. And so I was trying to figure this out, and I couldn't figure out a way to keep the private key private. No.
Also, you bring up a good point. Like, if anyone wants to see like our GitLab, like I have a VPN, we can go. I can pull that up for you if you want to see kind of more of the details of that. Like, I'm totally around to do that kind of thing.
Charles,
people are.
Just chime in. We're doing a status for our IC plugins as well. But GitLab, you can have certain secret variables. They're set up on a per project basis, so we have private keys stored that essentially it's saved in
Okay.
that.
So it's like in an environment variable.
Yeah, so it's safer than having a version control. I mean, there's still an element of risk, but at least it's not
Thanks.
How do you sell something like this to information security? I would go to this, they would go to this and say, okay, you want to download a Docker file, some random site on the internet, which downloads pre-built binaries, some other random site on the internet. And then it would get very unpleasant. Right now we have, we are doing a lot of things being built by hand, some of the with tools like Puppet. But ultimately, everything comes back to a vendor. In our case, mainly Red Hat. We're getting stuff from that vendor, and to a certain extent, at least we trust them in part because we can give them a lot of money. But something like this, how do you sell it?
Yeah, so I think the question, if I can generalize, is more about like how do you sell it to security, informational security.
Yeah.
So the Docker in relation to like the Docker image, like that's WordPress official, right? So it's no different than pulling it from just .org. So they're releasing that there's a community that's releasing that to Docker Hub. That's just not some random guy uploading WordPress there. So that's WordPress official.
I mean, in that
So-
image, you also have, a presumably pre-built version of Apache or Nginx, MySQL and MariaDB or whichever.
Yeah.
All of this other code that you can't necessarily vet where all of it came from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can trace it back. Like you can see everything, like where these repos live. And I mean, I guess in some ways, I think that maybe it's just open source. Like that's the nature of open source, but maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that. But I know also like we're not using it a lot now. Now maybe our ops teams will be looking into it, but GitLab does have security scanning tools that you can add to your CI process. So maybe that would be helpful for them to look into those and to kind of see what reports they can get from those particular tools.
Well, and I would also add that, I mean, if it was really a major concern, you could do the same essential thing that they're doing with their premium plugins, where you can set up your own repos and stop worrying about Docker, pull them from your private repos rather than pulling it from Docker's pre-built repos. So, I mean, if it was that major of a concern, you can just manage all of the code within your own repos.
That's what our customers do. We're a local dev tool for Docker, marrying Docker CMS, and all of our enterprise customers do exactly that. So you basically can create a trusted space or place, and you can get it actually from Red Hat or another vendor, and get certified that way, or you can control your own. So once you go to the sort of commercial paid edition, because our tool is open source too, you can start with it. But, so I would suggest going that route if you guys are already tied into Red Hat. OpenShift.
One additional thing
Yep.
we do from the security piece is, because I actually had to deal with this exact situation, is through the build process, you can actually go back and check some verification of all the files against what is important.
Right.
So as your build process, you can actually verify that every plugin, everything that's at least in the public repositories actually has checksum verification.
Yeah, I mean, WordPress itself, I actually just looked at the Docker file, and it looks like it basically just goes and gets the file from WordPress.org. I think our InfoSec folks are more concerned about all of those dependencies, all of the pre-built binary blocks, more than WordPress itself.
You have the same issue with anything that you're pulling in with Composer as well. So, I mean, if you're using any Composer libraries or dependencies, you're going to have the same potential issues with that as well. So that's...
Don't tell InfoSec
Right.
that.
I just, I mean, it's the nature of the web at this point. You have to decide who you trust and who you don't. And if you decide you can't trust people, then you set it up yourself.
Is there any question? I don't know how to get to the live persons.
You know, I think I saw in Slack that the Q&A is not implemented yet, so.
Yeah, Charles.
Just talking just a little bit more about how you built your Docker environment. You mentioned you're using Swarm, and you also mentioned that you were not HA. Everybody said you're not HA for WordPress environment. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we're using Swarm currently. Like in the current system, a lot of our stuff has been in tests, so we haven't done any of the HA stuff. But it's very easy in the compose file to just like bump up how many different the name is escaping me right now. Replicas you choose to have out there. So that's how we would do HA. Running into so we're basically troubleshooting Docker Swarm right now, and like the issues we're running into there.
You and lots of other people.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we're very aware that is not the end solution, but we're not at all tied to Docker Swarm, and that's why I mentioned the Kubernetes thing. Is that like that is looking very good for us right now. So.
Can you speak to the testing that you're doing, which tests you're doing, and what you're using to do the testing?
Yeah, so we're just making sure the builds are passing right now. The GitLab's new version, their automatic tooling, automatic DevOps kind of stuff is looking nice, so that you can throw some tests pretty easily through that. So that's what we're looking at, and what we're trying to add in the future is more of that testing. So. Chris?
Well, two questions, because near the beginning, I noticed when you were talking about your Docker file and all that kind of stuff, it looked like you had kind of your specific branches or tags or version numbers written in. So does that mean every time you guys update that, you have to go in and change your Docker file everywhere that Docker file lives? Or how are you managing that as opposed to just kind of pulling, master or something like that?
Yeah, so the question is about like the tagging of our Docker file or pulling in different repos within a Docker file. So as soon as so we're not doing any, so we basically have one site using our Docker file, but you could easily scale that. So once it's in the registry, you don't have to change you change that once, you push it to the registry, it has the same tags, and you basically have a release at that point. So then if you're having like multiple sites, they just like are pointing to that same release, right? And you can do it that way.
Yeah.
And for me, it's easy changing a number, just in those compose files. Right. So yeah, it's just like a little extra step, but I mean, you know exactly what's running at that point. But.
And then I guess my other question was about, because it sounds like you guys are using Docker from your local machine all the way up to live production environment, but I assume there are simple ways to kind of decide where and how because we're not going to be hosting in-house. We're not going to be, setting up Docker containers for our live production environment or anything like that. So, I assume that at some point you can just get to kind of a cutoff between local or even, locally hosted dev or QA, and then get to the point where you can somehow push that stuff to your live production server that's not a Docker container. But,
yes.
Okay.
So I'm running, I'm not necessarily running the Docker file. I make sure it builds and stuff on my machine, but that's, behind the scenes that my local machine is running Docker, because I use local too,
right.
Like local by Flyroll.
Right.
So, behind the scenes that's running Docker, but
right.
when I'm building that Docker file, I'm making sure that it builds correctly. And then I'm uploading that file into GitLab. And then again, it's making sure it builds and has the correct stuff in there. So that's where I said too, like with the lack of command line, is that you can run the Docker container or the Docker image in interactive mode, which you can then look at the file structure a little bit. And that's all done on desktop, like on my local machine. I can't do that part. There is ways to get to kind of a log in GitLab, but you're not going to be able to like cruise around and see
Right.
what's there.
What was your motivation to get started, Docker? I mean, why did you undertake the project?
Yeah, motivation. I mean, learning and stability of the system, intentional deploys. The motivation too, like I said early, is like we're going to run the main site with this, and so being very intentional about what we're releasing as main site. You know, it's not just like a faculty blogs, you know, kind of random WordPress server. Like it's the site. So we wanted to make sure that the site was available, or the site is available, and very intentional about what we deploy to site. So maybe you can.
This type of workload also seems to lend itself to keeping all of your moving parts more up to date than a traditional server. You know, I mean, it's just simply, you know, adjusting a composer file and writing it back, ready to go, ready to do your testing and things like that. That's doing a lot more QA testing or auto testing is really, I want to streamline getting the latest updates from plugins and pushing them through something that I can confidently push them out to production a lot faster than we do now. We're a little bit paranoid about pushing updates out. And so we get behind, and that's not good security. That's not good.
And I think that's a really good point, is that you can, especially in the testing piece, like, yeah, I mean, we're all manually testing at some point. So, but those manual things that you're doing, like those are a good opportunity to put that back into like to automate that. And you can do that incrementally. Like, you know, it was like, is the homepage available? Yes, there it is. Like, does our fancy emissions widget work? Yes. Like it can be a process. Like it doesn't have to be all at once. So that can be very powerful.
That's the reward you get from doing all the work ahead of time.
Yeah.
Is you have this huge, very complicated structure that you can then automate.
Yeah. And like I said too, like the Docker Hub WordPress thing is usually a couple days behind release, and that's kind of something that we've kind of accepted at this point. If we needed to, like we could do the update and like you said, host our own version, like and get that there immediately. Like we just haven't found that need right now. But I mean, yeah, there's a trade-off of that kind of thing. So I think I'm keeping you from lunch. Maybe 12:15 is the.
Yeah.
12:15 lunch.
12:15, I believe, is lunch.
Just want to leave you with this little image that we decided to create last night. So thank you very much.